Happy Hump Day. Camping was a big part of my childhood. One of my favorite memories growing up as a child were the times in the summer where we would go camping with our relatives. My uncles and aunts and our cousins, we would always pick a different provincial park within Ontario, and we would spend a week camping together. My fondest memories of these times spent together camping were the evening campfires, where the family would gather around the campfire. As children, we would listen in to my aunts and uncles telling stories from their past. Many of these stories ending with the entire group just engulfed in laughter, rolling in laughter. I always remember begging my parents if I could just stay up a little bit longer. I wanted to be part of that life that was gathering around the fire. In the morning, my brother and I were usually the first ones up. We'd crawl out of our tent and we'd make our way to that fire pit. A few lone lawn chairs remained, a pile of ash in the pit, maybe a whiff of smoke just rising up. But there was no more flames dancing above the pit. The life of that fire had disappeared. And we always took on the challenge of trying to revive that fire. We would gather some leaves and some twigs and some paper, and we would remove the ash out of the way, and it would reveal some hot embers. And we'd lightly blow on those light embers, and as we blew on them, they'd begin to glow bright. And we'd begin to place leaves and sticks and twigs upon those glowing embers. And as those flames began to grow, as it began to come to life, our breath was no longer enough to keep it going. We'd grab a newspaper and we'd begin to fan those flames, in which each fan, more life came to the fire. Until soon we could put some kindling on and eventually some wood, and then eventually we'd stand back and we'd look as we brought this fire back to life. We had revived it. Sometimes we're like that smoldering fire, aren't we? Our lives are like a smoldering fire that needs to be revived to life. There are times in each of our lives where we need some revival. When the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy, a young leader serving the church in Ephesus, you get this sense that Timothy needed some reviving. You get this sense that Timothy is on the verge of burnout. There are all sorts of reasons why Timothy is feeling weighed down and burnt out. His friend and mentor, the Apostle Paul, is in prison. The community in which he serves, evil only continues to grow. He's grieving as well, and he lives in fear as the church he serves faces persecution. Paul, sensing Timothy's struggles, pens this letter to him. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, we read these words: "Fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For the Spirit of God does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline." Paul continues to encourage Timothy throughout this letter. And he invites Timothy to remember. The first step of fanning into flame, reviving his life, is to remember all that God has done for Timothy. Remember, says Paul, remember it was Jesus Christ who saved us from our suffering, who saved us from the greatest suffering of all. And that to Paul was separation from God. It was Jesus Christ who suffered, died, and defeated death, and brought life and mortality to light through the gospel. Yes, says Paul, there is suffering and there is injustice in this world. But Timothy, we have been saved from the greatest of all sufferings. And as Paul continued to write to Timothy, he reminded him, and this, Timothy, is nothing because of what we have done. It is only through grace, a free gift from God. Perhaps you are feeling a little burned out on this Wednesday. Perhaps you need some reviving on this hump day. Perhaps you need to be reminded of the gift that God has given to you. Perhaps you need to fan into flame the gift of God. I encourage you to begin by feeding that flame, by remembering all that God has done for you through his Son, Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ, we have hope every day. I trust you enjoyed this Hope for Hump Day. Blessings.